With Fire Emblem quickly becoming one of Nintendo's top IPs, among other legendary titles like Mario and Legend of Zelda, the series is reaching a broader audience than ever before. And there are definitely a bunch of new potential fans out there that might have seen trailers or information about the upcoming Fire Emblem Three Houses game and may have a lot of questions regarding it. Whether this will be your first Fire Emblem, you've played Fire Emblem games before, you've only played the mobile game Heroes, or you're a longtime fan of the series, if you're wondering if Fire Emblem Three Houses will be a solid entry, or if you just don't quite know what to expect out of this game since they always seem to be a bit different, then this video is for you. So, should you buy Fire Emblem Three Houses? The short answer is probably, because it's looking to be a really great game and another solid entry in the series. But some fans are nervous about a lot of the changes with this new entry, or might not know quite what to expect when compared to previous games. So let's talk about it, and I hope that by the end of this video, you'll be able to come to your conclusion. Fire Emblem is a turn-based strategy RPG where you'll control a group of units on the battlefield and fight enemy armies. You'll build up support between various students and characters, grow attached to them, and experience the events of this new world of Fodlan, which is split between three major controlling powers: the Adrestian Empire, the Holy Kingdom of Faerghus, and the Leicester Alliance. Each Fire Emblem game is usually a little bit different than the others, with a brand new coat of paint on top of the similar classic series mechanics, and this game is no different. This time with Fire Emblem Three Houses, the game will be taking on some features reminiscent of other RPG series like Persona and even Langrisser, in that you will now function as a teacher for your students, there will be an in-depth calendar system and time-based mechanics with which to interact with them, your home base and battle preparations will now occur at the new fully explorable area known as the Garreg Mach Monastery, and you'll be able to hire various different kinds of soldiers and battalions to assist your students in battle. So let's address a lot of the new mechanics that you'll be experiencing and the main bullet points to consider when buying this game. Number 1. Teaching. A lot of the in-between story chapter mechanics will take place at the Garreg Mach Monastery, which contains the Officers Academy in which the player will be teaching. This is your home base of operations, where you'll interact with your students, train them, buy and sell weapons to equip to them, take on exams and upgrade them, etc. Ultimately, you'll be spending a lot of time in your playthrough here, which will be a little bit different than the Fire Emblem games of the past. Most Fire Emblem games take you directly from chapter to chapter, with some minor army management taking place at the preparation screens in between, while certain other Fire Emblem games give you a bit more freedom to free roam on the world map and explore in between the main missions. In Three Houses, the main missions will take place as mandatory events at the end of each calendar month. This means that you'll have the entire month to train your students and do what you need to do around the monastery to get everyone ready. You'll teach, explore, take on quests, and do side battles and other missions in the downtime, and then you'll return to the story battle once your free time is up. But if you're a little hesitant about this new teaching coat of paint splattered all over your classic Fire Emblem experience, they've also included options to auto-instruct and skip ahead in time, so you can quickly get back to doing the things that you love. I think this is a great compromise, and even though all of these new mechanics do seem quite a bit different than the Fire Emblem you might be used to, and might even intimidate you a bit, I think it's still going to feel a lot more like Fire Emblem than you might be expecting, and I don't think that it's anything to worry about. If anything, I think it's going to feel like a breath of fresh air and a great new experience for longtime players and new fans alike. Number 2. No customizable avatar character. A lot of fans who started with Fire Emblem Awakening and Fire Emblem Fates, both for the 3DS, really liked the ability to customize their own playable character within the game, and it allowed them to really feel like they were a part of the world that they were experiencing, which provided them further depth and immersion. For some other fans though, the inclusion of these rather generic, catch-all characters at the center point of the story introduced some problems with the overall plot and direction of those games. Generic doesn't always lend to interesting. Because these characters had to be general enough for most people to connect with and see themselves as, and then were at the heart and core of those games' storylines as the main protagonists, this arguably led to some rather bland writing and less memorable storylines in those games. But regardless of which side of the spectrum you're coming from into Three Houses, here's what you need to know. This time around you'll be playing as Byleth, the son or daughter of a mercenary named Geralt, who through a turn of events early on in the game, ends up teaching at the Garreg Mach Monastery's Officers Academy. Byleth will be your avatar character, but this time around, aside from selecting the gender of Byleth, you will not be able to customize their appearance, and probably not even their name. Byleth is a less personalized version of the avatar character, and may have come to be this way due to some of the complaints with Robin and Corrin. But even if you're disappointed in not being able to have a direct representation of yourself in the game, I think it's going to lend to Byleth being a much more interesting and memorable character in their own right, hopefully with some really cool twists and turns within the context of the game. And it seems like there's also some things, like their irreversible change in hair color later, that may have also contributed to this decision. Number 3. Difficulty. Fire Emblem is infamous for permadeath, where characters that you accidentally get killed on the battlefield will not come back. However, in recent entries, the developers have introduced both casual and classic modes, allowing the more casual players to have units that died in battle return in the next one. So if you're the type of person that finds permadeath intimidating and gets scared about losing your favorite units forever, or the heartbreak this would bring, you won't have to, as Three Houses is once again returning with both casual and classic modes. If you had a chance to play Fire Emblem Echoes, you might also remember a feature called Milla's Turnwheel. This was a brand new mechanic created for that game that basically allowed you to rewind time and undo mistakes that you made on the battlefield. If you got someone killed, all you had to do was expend a use of your turnwheel and undo that mistake. This saved a lot of players from having to reset and start long battles over again if they wanted to keep all of their characters alive. And while some fans didn't like the turnwheel because it made things easier and the game quite a bit less punishing to the player when mistakes were made, fans who wanted the extra challenge could easily just ignore the feature and not use it at all. In Fire Emblem Three Houses, this feature returns, this time called Divine Pulse. So whether you appreciated this mechanic before or not, either you can breathe easier knowing that you'll have a backup for when you make tactical errors, or you can just choose to ignore the feature once again. So I think it's still a win for everyone. Number 4. There's a time skip. Intelligent Systems, the developers of the Fire Emblem series, have often called back to previous games with their new releases, and Fire Emblem Three Houses is no different. Fire Emblem 4, Genealogy of the Holy War, prominently featured a time skip in the story, where after reaching a certain point in the game, you'd then jump ahead to years later, and play with the children of the characters you'd raised throughout the earlier stages of the game. This was an incredibly interesting mechanic, and we'll be seeing certain aspects of it return in Three Houses, though you won't be playing with the children or offspring of your students this time around. Instead, you'll get to see how everyone you've raised has grown over the 5-year gap in the middle of the story. This means they'll come back with new designs and appearances, new art, and we're not totally sure yet, but maybe even new skills or abilities too. I think it's going to be awesome to see your students all grown up and learn about what they've been up to over the 5-year period. They've also taken further inspiration from previous games as well, with mechanics like dismounting horses and Pegasi returning from Fire Emblem 3 to have mounted units return to grounded movement, and a return to the Holy Blood system of Fire Emblem 4, with certain characters having certain crests for increased power and abilities. Number 5. Marriage and Children. If you're familiar with Awakening and Fates, you might have very specific opinions about the marriage and children aspects of those games. Basically, in those games, you could pair up your characters in a lot of different ways, and you'd end up recruiting their offspring later on in the game that took on their skills and qualities, once again harkening back to Fire Emblem 4. This time around in Three Houses though, like I said, there won't be any children characters. There will, however, still be character marriage and pairing up. Marriage will be possible after the 5-year time skip within the game's story, when your students come back a bit older. You see, half the game will be spent during the early days of the academy as you teach your students and train them up. Then after the time skip, they'll be older, wiser, and come back better than ever. The monastery and the ability to teach them will still remain after the time skip, but it's more of a focus in the earlier portion of the game. It's at this point that marriage will be possible. But even before the time skip, you should plan ahead and build up supports with characters that you like, so that marriage after the time skip will come a lot easier. Let's talk about the petting mechanic. In Fire Emblem Fates, there was a lot of controversy over a feature within the My Castle part of the game, your customizable castle area, with a building called the Private Quarters. Here in the Private Quarters, you could invite any of your units to come speak with you, and in the Japanese original version of the game, you could end up playing certain minigames where you'd basically pet and touch them, among other things. It wasn't horrifically lewd, but apparently folks at Nintendo Treehouse deemed it a bit much for Western audiences, and the petting aspects of this feature were removed from the localized versions of the game. This sparked a lot of controversy, with a lot of fans feeling like they'd had something taken away from them with the removal of that content. For me personally, I was afraid that they'd nerf the entire building and have it be pretty useless after the censorship, but to my surprise, it actually mostly remained intact. The game just continued on as if you'd skipped or automatically won those minigames, and everything else was the same. So we really didn't miss out on too much, and I was decently satisfied with that result. However, this time around in Fire Emblem Three Houses, they've definitely learned from all of that. Bonding with your characters is back, but in a much more elegant and refined way, as befitting the setting of the game and the sophistication of the Officers Academy. This time you'll share tea with your students and get to look at them from many different angles as you converse. It's certainly a decent compromise, and a good way for them to dodge the millions of clickbaity articles that would have ensued had they not. So this time, there should be a lot less controversy with the game, and I think that's a win, although games and media these days tend to use that extra controversy for attention. Number 6. Every choice matters this time? With Fire Emblem Fates, the developers touted the idea of player choice, in which they wanted the player to feel in control and have their choices matter by giving them the ability to choose various different paths and see how the story played out. But whether you enjoyed those games or not, there was definitely some disappointment within a lot of the fanbase. There was really only one important choice that the player got to make, and that was which side of the conflict they wanted to support. And unfortunately, a lot of players felt like the stories of each path as a result of this choice just seemed to miss the mark. Thankfully though, this time around in Three Houses, it seems your choices as the player will matter much more. Once again, there will be at least 3 different story paths, one for each of the houses that you can choose. And according to the leaks, there may actually be another branching path for one of them. From the official DLC announcement, we also know that DLC having something to do with the game's story will be coming further on down the road, which could lend to more additions or more branching paths. It also seems heavily implied in official materials that these branching story paths will be leading to different outcomes, so it seems very likely that you won't just be seeing 3 different sides of the same story. This should end up leading to the potential of providing the player with multiple different playthroughs worth of content, which sounds great. Though it is starting to sound quite a bit similar to Fates again in this regard, I'm hoping that they'll do it much better on the second go-around. In a recent article from JuVideo.com, Toshiyuki Kuzakihara, the director of Three Houses, stated that it took him 80 hours to beat a single story path in the game without skipping cutscenes. While that number could have easily been embellished, it seems like there will definitely be plenty to enjoy from each path, and ultimately lead to Three Houses yielding players hundreds of hours of gameplay when playing through each of the different storylines. But not only will you choose which house to teach and get a story resulting from that path, you'll also have complete control over how to teach and train your students into becoming whatever classes you want them to, including a lot more freedom with which weapons they'll be able to wield. Deciding how to teach, what to focus on, and when to get everything done is another way that this game will provide even more depth and add further weight to the player's choices. You'll have a limited amount of times you can teach per week, and this will lead to even more potential outcomes for different players. You'll also be able to choose and recruit at least a few students from the other houses, which could end up granting the player various different paralogs or side missions if you've got the characters required. On top of this, for any students that you do recruit from other houses, you'll be saving them from their potential deaths and changing their fate in the bitter battles following the time skip. Because from what we know from the trailers, it seems that the 3 houses will be at war following the 5-year time gap. So the story will also have the potential to be much more heart-wrenching and enveloping this time around too, which I think sounds amazing. Number 7. There won't be a weapon triangle. One of Fire Emblem's classic recurring mechanics is the weapon triangle. It brings a rock-paper-scissors-esque system into the games, where swords beat axes, axes beat lances, and lances beat swords. Sometimes this weapon triangle also has more embellishment or more weapons built in to add further depth to the game's battle system, but this time around in Three Houses, this mechanic will be absent. If you've played and enjoyed Fire Emblem Echoes, then you've already experienced a Fire Emblem game without this mechanic, but I think Intelligent Systems has opted to leave it out this time due to their inclusion of the amount of freedom the player will now have with their units and weapon choices. In most Fire Emblem games, characters are locked to just a few distinct weapon types depending upon their class. But this time around, from what we've seen, it's looking like you'll be much more free to give characters whatever weapons that you want, with the only caveat being that some classes are unable to use magic. So I think they wanted to allow for a lot of experimentation in this game, and since we've also got some new weapon types like gauntlets, they'd have either had to expand the weapon triangle significantly to have each weapon make sense with it, or remove it completely, and they've opted for the latter. I think with the removal, it's also going to make fun runs possible, where you can have multiple units all using the same weapons or other crazy ideas, because otherwise you'd just be at a constant disadvantage against certain enemies, and now you won't have to be. Magic this time around will work a little bit like Echoes, where there won't be actual spellbook items like in previous games, and characters will just know and learn certain spells. However, unlike Echoes, spells will not cost HP to cast. They can be learned by increasing your character's Reason Magic and Faith Magic skill levels. If you're familiar with past Fire Emblem games, Reason Magic is essentially Dark and Anima Magic, and Faith is now the name for what was previously Light Magic and Healing Staves. At this point, we still don't know everything about magic yet, but it seems that some classes will possess innate spells, and if characters have already learned that spell when they get it again, they'll be able to use it twice as many times. So magic spells might have limited uses per map, which could be interesting. Combat arts, which first appeared in Fire Emblem Echoes, are also back, allowing the player certain skills and abilities in battle that will cost uses of their weapons. So you can trade some of your weapon's durability for more powerful attacks, or attacks with more specific effects to suit the situation. This time around, they're also not bound to certain weapons, so your characters will just learn them as they grow and level up in their classes. There's also new skills called Gambits, which will vary with the different types of battalions and soldier squads that you'll be sending your students into battle with. and each character will also have personal abilities with their own interesting effects, as well as on top of whether or not they have crest abilities. So the amount of customizability and depth to the combat system will certainly still be there, even without the weapon triangle itself. It also seems that Pair Up from Awakening and Fates will also be making a comeback. Pair Up was a mechanic where you could have another unit back up a main unit, disappearing from the field but providing them with bonus stats, extra attacks, and guarding. This time, it'll be returning as the Assistant system. When Violet's instructor level reaches a certain point, each unit can then be assigned an assistant to help them in battle, and participate in coordinated attacks. However, this would mean that whichever student is set as the assistant will not be able to be deployed separately on the battlefield, so once again, they'll function as one group unit for that battle. The assistant may perform follow-up attacks at the end of the fight, they may guard the main student from enemy follow-up attacks, or even heal the main student at the start of a turn. Assistants will still gain experience from battles too, so this could be a good way of training a weak unit by assigning them as an assistant to a strong unit to level them up and avoid danger. Number 8. LGBT relationships. Fire Emblem Fates brought with it several new firsts for the series, including the addition of LGBT relationships within the game. Certain characters were now able to be in same-sex relationships to the enjoyment of many fans, although it was rather limited and many wish that there had been more potential romantic options. This time around in Fire Emblem Three Houses, this inclusiveness will definitely be returning, but we aren't sure just yet how many potential options there will be for romancing. The so far mostly plausible Thanabomb leak that we've gotten has mentioned a few characters being potential gay options for the player, but we haven't officially seen very much on this topic and likely won't know until the game is out. What we do know is that from this rough screenshot, it looks like there aren't going to be any gay options within the initial cast of the Blue Lions characters. If the leaks are accurate though, then there will definitely be some bi characters, and hopefully there are quite a few more characters in the cast of the game that have just yet to be revealed and can be recruited later on that will offer these potential options, so that no matter which path you choose, you'll have some solid choices. But this is all we know right now, and so far it isn't much. Number 9. Online features. Fire Emblem has always been a mostly single-player experience, as that's what the core gameplay and mechanics are catered to. But some fans like me enjoy the occasional multiplayer outing of battling others or even just fighting AI-controlled versions of our friends' armies, and these mechanics have come and gone across various entries in the series. For Fire Emblem Three Houses, this time around there will be no multiplayer. This isn't a deal breaker in any way, but it would have been nice to see some more cooperative features like this to go with the Switch's portability. There will, however, still be online features, the first of which is called the Global Activity feature, which will show you percentages of the other player's choices, actions, and selections across the world on weekend days, as well as character lending and item trading between traveling exchange students from other players. And there will also be a Lost Spirits system, where during skirmishes, there will be special tiles which show the locations where other players had problems and had units die. If you're able to survive on those tiles, you'll receive additional bonuses due to the higher difficulty. And there could also be more features beyond this as well. So it won't be completely devoid of online features, but it seems that multiplayer battling is out, and we've yet to hear anything about fighting your friends' computer-controlled students in battle either. To join in on these online features this time around, you're also going to need a Nintendo Switch Online subscription, which is a paid yearly subscription to utilize the Nintendo Switch Online services, so keep that in mind too. The game will also support the usage of amiibo figures, with its area called the Amiibo Gazebo, where upon scanning an amiibo, you'll be granted some items. It seems that there might also be special rewards if you scan Fire Emblem amiibo based upon what has been said, but we haven't gotten this confirmed just yet, nor do we know exactly what it does. It seems you may be able to unlock classic player phase music for optional battles, and Chico from Nintendo Treehouse said that whatever it is, we'll just have to find out. Number 10. DLC. With recent Fire Emblem games, we've seen steady servings of downloadable content. This usually varies from bonus EXP maps, extra gold maps, new recruitable characters, and even some side stories or additions to the main storyline. And in Fire Emblem Three Houses, we'll also be seeing DLC yet again. What Fire Emblem always seems to get right about this though, is that they only ever seem to include extra odds and ends in the DLC, and the game itself always ships as a full game experience. It's all usually just convenient stuff to have that you don't necessarily need, or some extra little flares and additions to the base game. Sure, in games of the past, you could absolutely trivialize the difficulty if you took on too many EXP or gold maps, but it's never been necessary to rely on these maps, and you'd have only done that if you wanted to anyway. With Fire Emblem Echoes, however, some fans were upset over the pricing of the DLC Season Pass, with it setting players back about $45, which was even more than the cost of the base game itself for way less content. However, thankfully it seems that Intelligent Systems has learned their lesson from Echoes, and this time around the DLC Season Pass, called the Three Houses Expansion Pass, will only cost $25, which I think sounds very fair. From what we know, the DLC this time around will include character costumes or outfits, paralog maps, support items, additional quests, and eventually even new story content with some additional playable characters, locations, and more. There will also even be free updates for the game, and the rollout will be across several months following the game's release, into April of 2020 for the story DLC. But once again, like I said, if you're not a fan of DLC, I'm positive that the base game will still be great, and you probably won't miss out on too much. Well, that's basically everything. I know that was a lot to take in, but if any of that sounded appealing to you, then I think you have your answer. Personally, I think that this game has the potential to be one of the best Fire Emblem games yet, and it seems that they're going out of their way to please as many potential fans as possible, and I love that. What I wanted most out of a new Fire Emblem game was great replay value, and Three Houses is shaping up to have that in spades. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, slash the thumbs up down below, get subscribed for more Fire Emblem Three Houses coverage up to the launch of the game, and hopefully some helpful guides to come after it's out. Follow us on Twitter if you'd like to get the latest Three Houses news and updates as they come. You can also chat with us on our Discord server if you want to talk Fire Emblem Three Houses and other games with our community there. And of course, a huge thank you to all of my amazing patrons that help to make content like this possible. And I'll see you all next time.
No.